Hi, good evening. Welcome to Untitled Chapter and a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon Lhamo. This is part 7 in her series of the transfer of consciousness at death. The practice for this is called POA, and this part 7 is entitled How to Die. And so, please join us.
Last night, I had the pleasure of talking to Gyaltsen Rinpoche again. We like to check in on each other every now and then. And I told Gyaltsen Rinpoche about the retreat and how we were doing and who was here and how everything was going. And I told him about the people in the retreat that are actually practicing specifically because they have the beginning, the onsets or the symptoms or the conditions that will eventually bring about the end of their lives. We do have HIV positive people and people with AIDS here in the room. And so, we have some other conditions as well. And then we have the rest of us that are just doing it through old age so far. But he said to tell those special participants, he said to tell you that he sends you his blessing and that he is happy and pleased and really full of joy that you have come. And he said that I will also be pleased with you because those of you that are practicing out of necessity and are practicing because you have come to the point in your life where you have awakened to the faults of cyclic existence. It has been literally slammed in your face, and it is not a comfortable or happy thing to see. And so you have two ways to come out of this, and one of the ways is with courage and with faith and with dignity, and the other way is to fall apart and be a baby. And he said fall apart and be a baby is what we did before. He said now we don't have to do that. He said to tell you all that the amount of times that you have died and taken rebirth is literally uncountable, that you have been through this experience many times before, but he said to tell you this is the first time that you will be able to encounter this experience with nobility, with dignity, with preparation, and with hope in the way that you have never had hope before. And he said to tell you also that you are in the hands of Tara and that you should consider that you are in good hands and that you are thoroughly blessed. And he said to tell you of all the people that are attending POA, and he means this sincerely, he's not saying this to make anyone feel better, it's not a joke. He said those of you that are practicing with clear intention because you know what is up for you, he said you are the luckiest of all of us, because the rest of us will not know and we will not be prepared. So he said to tell you thank you, that you have earned this privilege, that it is tailor-made in such a way that you have come together with your root guru, who has this capacity and who is connected with you in this way and who has been doing this for sentient beings for a very long time, and that you are in fact, you deserve this, you have earned this, and you are extremely fortunate. And there is no way that you could nicely and neatly come towards the last portion of your lives together with your root teacher with this kind of auspicious conditioning if you had not prayed for this many, many times in your past. You must have prayed specifically to have been reborn in my entourage, and then specifically even beyond that you must have prayed for me to be with you when your time comes, or this would not happen, because this does not happen easily. So he said to tell you that he sends you his tashidile, and he says to tell you that he's proud for you and happy for you and that he loves you. And so that's that. So that's your wonderful good message for today. And then we are going to continue on with our POA practice, with our POA teachings. And part of the POA practice, of course, is the accumulation of virtue and merit through the practicing of preliminary practice, or ngundro. So now we have talked a bit about the bardo, and we have talked a bit about the different stages of the bardo. I have given you warnings of some of the things that are of exactly what you will meet at the time of death, in terms of things that will take you aback and frighten you. And I've also and I've told you how to prepare for them and how to view them and how to understand them, and specifically that you should understand them as displays of your own nature, and that literally in the bardo there is nothing to be afraid of. There is far more to be afraid of in life than there is in the bardo. Actually, in life, you can get run over by a truck and it will change your mind rather drastically. But in the bardo, you cannot be run over by a truck because it won't do a thing. And though there are many experiences that you will have, the only thing you have to fear is fear itself, literally. Because in the bardo, nothing can harm you. Everything that you see, nothing that you see can harm you, and everything that you see is an extension of your own mind, your own inner condition. And so the best thing to do in the bardo is to learn and to accomplish view and to do whatever you can to set up any of the auspicious conditions that I have described. And those conditions are, of course, liberation through recognition, the recognition of the meditational deities and yidams that appear in the peaceful and the wrathful bardo, and specifically the recognition that causes one to aspire with devotion and to call out, rather than to move away from something with which we are unfamiliar. So we are asking you, so you are being asked then to remember and to practice so that you may have liberation upon recognition. And there is also liberation through calling out. And that liberation through calling out is that perhaps you may not have recognized firmly any of the meditational deities or even the presences of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. You may not have recognized that, but you have managed to not escape the bardo. That means you have not run from what you have seen and not been able to interpret, but that you are still there. And so then the next thing that you are asked is to practice in such a way that you will always consistently throughout this moment in your life until the end of your life have the presence of mind to always call out for the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, always call out for your Lhama. If you develop that presence of mind now, that in every circumstance that is a difficult or challenging circumstance, instead of getting into your stuff, which is what our first tendency is to do, we're trying to train ourselves out of that, because that won't work in the bardo. Trust me on this. If you get into your stuff and, you know, your pride and your neuroses and your judgment and your fear and your anger and your blah, 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 baby stuff, whatever, oh, poor me, whiny, whiny, any of that stuff, any of the stuff that we all do, and I'm poking at you so that you'll recognize it, not so that I will separate myself from you and say, I don't do this, you do, because all human beings have these moments. But our job now is to train ourselves out of these moments from now until the time of our death, so that our minds are more prepared when we are in the bardo not to revert and resort to our old habitual tendency. And what you would want to do is to practice literally liberation through recollection. And liberation through recollection and liberation through calling out would be recollecting or remembering the connection with and the blessing of one's root guru. Remember with devotion and you know, recollect all of the teachings, or recollect enough to remember one's teacher. And one can also recollect, even if one cannot recognize, one can recollect the blessings of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, and one can call out to the three precious jewels. Particularly, one can recollect Lord Buddha Amitabha himself, and with strong, fervent regard, remember that he is only waiting for the support of your connecting your mind through devotion with him. He's only waiting for that support so that he can take you onto himself. This is the goal and the wish and the great compassion of Buddha Amitabha, is to rescue you. That is his only wish. And so that recollection, that remembering, and that calling out, again, will provide liberation through recollection, liberation through beseeching or through calling out. And so this is another opportunity that one might have. And of course there are the other things that one can do. One can, if one finds oneself actually in the bardo of becoming and cannot recollect the teachings, teachings on devotion, cannot summon or muster up the kind of devotion that will actually create the support for seeing one's teacher in the bardo. Not to say that the teacher will not be there, because if you have the blessing of having your teacher practice for you, whether or not you recognize, that blessing will still be there. Of course, it will be more profoundly felt and registered and supported if one's own devotion makes that possible, you see. So we practice that in the bardo of becoming. We still have not recognized the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. We have not recollected the teachings on our Lamas or on the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. We have not recollected the teachings on Amitabha, and so we have not felt that we have connected or that we have been comforted in any way. And then in that case, you still have the opportunity to practice understanding, or the simple remembrance, that of all the 6 realms of cyclic existence, one should aspire to the human realm, and that one should think upon addressing the opportunity to enter into the human realm, that one should make prayers at that time. One should visualize, first of all, that the mother and father that one has come to see, and we are looking for a human mother and father, that as they come together in union, offering and providing for you the red bodhicitta and the white bodhicitta, which is their innate seed, then at that moment you should visualize the mother and the father, not with lust or desire. And then again, now you have to practice not having that kind of lust or desire, but rather stabilize the mind through practice. And so you practice not having lust and desire, not thinking in that way, in that kind of heavy, grasping way, but instead, upon viewing the mother and father that will be the providers of your seed and your place to come into the world, then you should think of them as the male and female meditational deities, literally the Buddha and consort in union. You may think of them as Amitabha and consort in union, or any Buddha and their consort in union. You should think that they are meditational deities, and you should make prayers as you enter into this, that you will meet immediately with the Dharma, that circumstances will guide you instantly to the Dharma, and as soon as possible you will begin to practice, and that surely in this lifetime you will practice, and you then make prayers that in the next bardo you will recognize, you will be knowledgeable, and you will be mindful, and you will be prepared. And so there are many different levels of accomplishment that one can achieve through the different places in bardo where one finds oneself. It's like, what I'm meaning to say is that yes, there are the superior places in the bardo where one can achieve liberation, where one can maintain mindfulness through practice. There are the intermediate or moderately suitable, intermediate or midland places where one can call out, or one can recognize, or one can beseech, or one can remain mindful, and in that way one will have a fair to middling opportunity, and still actually come back in a way that is different, in a way that benefits sentient beings, although perhaps not fully and completely realized. And then there is the other way in which one will come back as a human being, but will come back having already given rise and begun to ripen and brought to the forefront the necessary virtue and opportunity by which one will be able to practice and then soon achieve realization. So there are many levels of opportunity within the bardo, and one should not think that if one has somehow found oneself smack dab in the middle of it, knowing that one is going through the bardo, not really sure of what you've missed, and that could very well happen, that at any moment where you are, when mindfulness returns to you, and it will return to you periodically throughout the bardo state, that you will remember through the force of your training some element of what you have been taught here, and you will be able to either achieve an auspicious rebirth, or a rebirth that brings about liberation, or that even is consistent with liberation. All of these things are possible, and they are possible to the degree that we practice. Now the next thing that you have to realize is that the determinators of these kinds of experience are pretty cut and dry. We would think that it sounds kind of like shooting pool, in a way, or, playing one of those gambling games in Las Vegas where you pull down the arm and you come up with 3 cherries or 3 lemons or 3 different things or whatever they happen to be. It seems almost that random. It seems as though we just don't know. We're kind of on a sea and everything's pretty rocky and we don't know how things are going to ripen. Essentially that is true, and this is what we are taught about the faults of cyclic existence. This is actually what our lamas have taught us to meditate on, to turn our minds and ripen our minds for liberation, so that the obstacles of self-absorption and slothfulness and laziness and those kinds of things will dissipate. We actually train our minds to become more firm by viewing the faults and problems associated with cyclic existence that literally cannot be solved, that they are part and parcel with cyclic existence. So you must think that, how is it that I will know? How is it that I will be prepared? How is it that I will recognize? All of these things are questions, and they are valid questions. I can tell you that it is not random, that it seems random, but in fact, the ripening of karma, the ripening of meritorious karma, that kind of karma which contributes to one's well-being, the kind of karma that one receives when one has engaged in meritorious or virtuous activity that has benefited others. To the degree that you have accumulated that sort of karma, and to the degree that that sort of karma is actually at that time ripening within your mind. So you're looking for not only a content or a weight of virtuous karma, but you're also looking for catalytical events that will catalyze the drawing forth of that karma into your present time and space grid. Now here's what you have to understand in association with that thought, and that is, we have experienced the idea of self-nature as being inherently real, and have therefore wandered in the samsaric view of dualistic mind. We have separated the idea of self and other. We discriminate and have very firm ideas about subjective and objective experience, and all of these things have been happening literally since time out of mind, inconceivable time. When Rinpoche said that you all have done this before, he meant really, you have died so many times before. You just can't believe it. And it's funny, here we are, and each time we seem to die in ignorance because of the nature of samsara. It is that we cannot remember from one lifetime or one experience to the other. Yet still, you have done this many times, and as luck would have it, here you are. So, while that has happened, yet you have always died in ignorance, and the circumstances, the conditions have not arisen until this very time. And how did that happen? It's very hard for us to determine. But the circumstances have not arisen until this very time for you to have the opportunity to prepare yourself. And so now that time is here, and we have to take full advantage of it. But this is one such very catalytical event that will bring about the end of the times in which you will die in ignorance and be reborn in ignorance, therefore. So this is one such catalytical event. And the other supporting events are, of course, meeting with the path, being born in a place where the Dharma is taught clearly, being born within the presence of one's root guru, and finding and connecting with one's root guru in such an auspicious way that the Dharma can be taught in a way that can enter into our minds and mix with our experience and can educate us. So all of these catalytical events have been satisfied, and furthermore there is every indication that even the kind of karma or merit is now ripening and will come and is coming forward, even now as we speak, coming forward in your mind to prepare you for this at last awakening death rather than ignorant death. It is obvious from the fact that you are here and you are practicing and you are trying to learn and you are absorbing some of this information that it must be so, that this is the time. It must be so. And so from every indication, we are planning, we are assuming that first of all, we will have the merit and opportunity to practice this way at the time of our death, because it seems as though that merit is ripening. The opportunity is getting bigger. We look at it in this way. We look at it from the sense of continuum. 2 years ago, you could not have been prepared to die. 2 years ago, you could not have had the information that will provide for you the sustenance necessary. And it was nowhere in sight. It was nowhere in sight. And now suddenly, 2 years later, you are not only, the table is not only set, but the food has been served up and you have eaten half of it. So you can see, if you examine from the perspective of continuum, 2 years back and 2 years ahead, you are seeing something that is growing. The bag of events, the container of events, has become more full, larger. The condition is a growing condition. You're in a phase where you are learning more than you had before. You are more prepared than you had before. You can only assume, and I think safely assume, that these conditions are ripening, that they are ripening more and more as you continue, and that they will hopefully continue to ripen. But you cannot assume that these conditions will continue to ripe without obstacles. And the reason why you can't assume that is that, look at your life. Let me ask you about your life. Have you had the experience so far in your life where things were going really well? Things were going really well and it looked like you're pretty set up. Things are going well, you have a job, you have a life, things are set up. And then suddenly, even within the realm of ordinary existence, it's over. Something changes. You lose the job, or you lose your health, or just the conditions change. They simply change, and there was no preparation. It was finished, those conditions just changed. So from that you may have noticed, since again we are examining our lives from the point of view of continuum, you may have noticed that continuum does not always work in a certain direction. If an experience is increasing, it does not always definitely increase until the end of your life. You've learned that so far, haven't you? If a situation is decreasing, on the other hand, if you are losing something, if things are going badly for you, then also you have noticed that it may also happen, and it has happened in your life, that suddenly things will turn around. A gift, something will come out of the blue that you could not have expected. Hasn't that happened to you? Haven't you had that kind of thing happen to you? Sure. And you can expect also that that is another pattern that we see within the samsaric reality of the continuum we experience. So these are things that we have noticed. We can, in our training, one of the things we are required is to examine and note such things rather than going through life stupid, barefoot and ignorant, the way that we like to go through life, particularly when we're younger and we don't realize that life does what it does. We prefer to go through life sort of blissfully ignorant and not thinking about things too much, not being particularly stressed out, but basically just simply looking for some gratification. That's just basically what it is. And now that we have come to the point in our lives when it looks like we better do something else, or have another idea perhaps, we can look back. 20/20 hindsight is always pretty darn accurate. We can look back and have gone through extensive periods in our life when we were only interested in gratification. And even that has changed. Why has that changed? In many cases it has changed because we have been forced to see the sufferings of cyclic existence even against our own will. So these are the things about the continuum of samsaric experience that we should notice. And now, from having noticed that, we may also have noticed, at least if we're smart, we may have noticed that it would be a darn good idea if we had a little control. I don't know if any of you have noticed how scary samsara is if there is no method whatsoever. Literally, those people that cannot, because they do not, I mean, let's face it, all sentient beings, and this is part of the Ngundro teachings, all sentient beings have the desire to be happy. That is a unifying idea, force, element within all of us. Every single one of us, no matter how we appear. From the very ones that perhaps you are no longer, the ones that are just only exclusively engaged in gratification and pleasure seeking. Perhaps you yourself know what that is like, and now you have changed. So from that kind of sentient being to the other extreme, the kind of person who does nothing but plan and study and keep themselves very academic and very dry, you know, kind of a dry kind of life. Those kinds of people that are all work and no play. From another extreme might be persons whose entire life and mind is simply pathologically distorted, such as a person who is a murderer, even a serial killer, even such an extreme like that we can't even imagine. That kind of thing to a small child who is whining and complaining and giving you a hard way to go, and maybe even having a temper tantrum and insisting that they want to play Game Boy one more time before bed. If not, they will have a temper tantrum, that sort of thing. Whatever kind of extremes human being we are, and any other life form, the one thing that we all have in common is that we wish to be happy. To the degree that each of us seeks out happiness in different ways, and how different are the ways. One is seeking it through constant instant gratification. The other is seeking it through discipline and structure and deep thoughts. And the other one is experiencing it through losing the mind for another 15 more minutes in Game Boy. And the other one is seeking it through murdering others and gaining control and power over others. Believe it or not, all of these methods, no matter how distorted and how unbelievable they are all methods by which we try to be happy. How odd, isn't it? How is it that one person can see that happiness may come through accumulating merit and virtue, through exhibiting kindness and generosity, and through practicing Dharma, and another one will think that happiness is gained through the practice of mutilating and harming and killing others? But that is the reality of samsaric existence. Both of these people are brethren, they are brothers and sisters. These extremes, because they are all trying to seek happiness. One has enough virtue and merit ripening in their mind to be able to see with clarity where happiness will come from. And those are the ones that seek out practice and methods that will bring about temporary and ultimate happiness. And you are those people. You are the fortunate ones who have enough karma and merit ripening in your minds. And the other poor people, poor unfortunate people who are still involved in instant gratification, and some never get out of it. They just get older when they do it. And then when you get older, nothing's that instant, but they're still trying to get gratified. So then we think about those people that they never quite get out of it. Just do it slower. And then we think about the other people who are continuing on their path, and their method arises, of course, from the mind of extreme delusion and extreme hatred. And of course their path then, which is every bit a path as much as Buddhism is, who's to say that one path is not a path and the other one is? They're both paths. And his path is murdering and butchering others. And let's say, and what is his result? Of course his result is a further fall. His result is probably death, great suffering on his part, fall to a lower rebirth. His result, of course, will be that he will return and he will experience the same death that he has given to others. And that is his result. So you see, here you are now traveling a path or a method that has been born from the mind of enlightenment. And the only way that that can happen is that you have accumulated enough virtue for that to have been the case, where you are catalytically inspired and set up to practice this path and this method. So you are practicing a method that originates with the mind of enlightenment. It travels in the method that is described and the way that is outlined and given to us by the mind of enlightenment, and the result therefore will be the mind of enlightenment, where another person would be traveling a path that begins in the mind of hatred and ignorance. The path itself remains on the track of hatred and ignorance, does not deviate, and of course the result must also be hatred and ignorance. Further hatred and ignorance. So, this is why we live as we do, and this is why we die as we do. At the moment of death, when the elements dissolved, as I have described, when all of the elements dissolved, there is a feeling of fluidity that happens at that time that one does not experience during the course of one's life. And the reason why is, again, I've explained this to you, it is the nature of this particular samsaric dimension, this physical dimension, that there is a certain way or commonality to the experience. There is a certain way that it is agreed that experience will take place. And it has to do with the elements of which this scenario are comprised. We are comprised of certain elements, and there are certain spiritual elements that come together, and it is simply the nature of a physical continuum that there will be an element of time. And particularly this also happens in that we experience self-nature as being inherently real. We differentiate between subjective and objective, and in order to understand a distinct subjective and objective experience, we have to mark that through a kind of moving through time. We have to experience linear time. We have to mark progressions in order to maintain this particular kind of diluted experience. And so it is the nature of physical reality for things to take time. Whereas in the bardo, once the elements have dissolved, time is no longer a factor in the way that we understand it. Yeah, there is a time on the outside of the bardo that we can mark, a time between when the person actually dies and the person achieves rebirth. We can mark that time, but in the bardo, time is instantaneous and it has not the same meaning that it has now, and it's because the elements are dissolved. And so, in the bardo, everything and anything ripens. In fact, one could say that the entire sum total of one's mind ripens within the bardo. When we see the wrathful meditational deities, when we see the peaceful Buddhas, and all of the different kinds of circumstances, again, there are many elements of the bardo experience that are individual. In the bardo experience, in the same way that you constantly have ideas now, and you constantly have notions that come into your head, and they appear almost with rapid fire succession. And for some people, really, it is so fast and so overwhelming. The constant ideation, the process of blah, 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 that happens within our minds, that we literally can't hear it. It's happening so fast. It just sounds like white noise. You just know something's going on in there. You can't even distinguish what you're thinking. You have no idea what's in your mind right now. The person can, have you ever had that happen where a person next to you will say, "Penny for your thoughts," or "What are you thinking?" And they'll be saying that because you're obviously thinking. I mean, they can see the rapid eye movements and the twitching in the eye, you know, and you're doing all these things. And I mean, it's obvious that you're having some sort of internal conversation or something, you know, something is definitely going on. And the person will say to you, "What are you thinking?" And if you stop, you just don't know. You don't know. And that's because there's so much of that garbage happening in your mind that it's just like white noise. You have learned to ignore it. It's too darned noisy. So you've actually even more closely compartmentalized your mind so that you're over here and your thoughts are over there and you're everywhere. There is no relaxation within the mind. Well, in the bardo, the form that takes is that the mind, instead of having the constant white noise kinds of noises that we have now, the mind has constant visual stimulation, constant sort of hallucination experiences. That there is very little time in the bardo where something is not happening. There is constantly the experience, but it's projected outward. It externalizes. And it's because the elements have dissolved and there is nothing with which to knit it together, to put it into a certain format or usual context, so that you will recognize it in the way physical beings do. In the bardo, things are much more fluid, and so there are constant events. And so you will have unique individual experiences that you cannot prepare for. But what they all are, no matter what, regardless of what you are experiencing, you can know this and know this to the depth of your being. There is not one thing, no matter how disturbing or how fantastically gorgeous, that you can see in the bardo, and you will see both. No matter what you see, this is an externalization of an event that is happening in your mind. It is exactly like the kind of thing you're doing now when you're either dreaming and stuff just comes up, or have you ever had the experience when you're falling into sleep or coming out of sleep, and it's like there's conversations going on in your head, you feel that there are people around you, sometimes you can even hear things happening, but then you wake up and you find out they didn't really happen at all. Or perhaps, have you ever had this happen? I know this has happened to me one time. I was trying to fall asleep, but I had had some coffee and I couldn't quite crack the threshold. And this was in the afternoon when it's hard for me to sleep anyway, but I really needed a nap. And so as I was falling asleep, I could feel it was weird, it was like dying. It was very much like a bardo experience. I could feel the sinking. You know, there was a feeling of sinking, and your body would jerk a couple of times. That's when you know you're really never going to get to sleep. But your body feels like it's sinking, and then you jerk, and then you try to sink, start sinking again, and then you jerk. And then suddenly I'm closing my eyes, and I'm totally aware of my environment, I think. I think that my eyes are closed, but that I forgot they're closed and they seem opened. And I'm perceiving the light, I think, on my eyelids. I can really perceive the light. And suddenly I smelled smoke, found myself smelling smoke, and then I heard footsteps. And I woke up and what's happening? This house is on fire, what's happening? And I'm checking around the house, there's no smoke. There's no footsteps, there was no one else in the house but me. And I realized, and then by feeling, you can tell that that was one of those kinds of hallucinatory experiences that you feel when you have, as you do have when you fall into the dreaming state. It's very much like a subtle kind of death. It's not as overwhelming or all-pervasive. It's not permanent, in the way that we understand permanence either. But there is some of the same things happen. Some of the elements do dissolve. Some of the same events actually take place. And so that was like a little death. It was good because it was kind of practicing like a little death. And it reminds us to be mindful no matter what the experiences are. And here I was, supposed to be knowing what I'm doing, and I was thinking that there actually was footsteps there. And here I even had some of the experiences that one has in the bardo. One smells things in the bardo. One hears things in the bardo that are like things that we recognize from the physical. So each one of us will have completely individual kinds of experiences in the bardo. How can we prepare for them? First of all, there are several things that are very, very important factors. Two of them are of the utmost importance, and one of them, of course, is the preparation for the bardo that you are doing now. And when we begin to talk about that, and we're going to start talking about that today, we will be talking about the ngundro section of your bardo teaching, of your poa teaching, which is the preparation for the actual practice of poa. But the other factor, and this is an important factor, these are rather the conditions that one experiences around the time of one's death, and even the time immediately preceding one's death. These are the mental conditions. Because the elements are dissolving at the time of death, you should know, and you should take this into account, that because the elements are dissolving, it is not, you would think that you're dying, my goodness, you wouldn't be as reactive as you are when you're alive, but in fact, because the elements are dissolving, we are as reactive, if not more reactive. When we are dying, we're delicate, very fragile, than we are when we're alive. So the body, it's odd, as we are going through the different dissolution of elements, there is a point at which technically the person stops hearing in the way that we understand hearing, going into the ears and registering in the brain, and yet it has also happened that the person has become more suggestible and more sensitive to sound. How is that? No ears. And yet it's true. The person still remains sensitive to sound and very suggestible. And there comes a time when you can actually stick something into a person's hand, and because their energy has begun to dissolve in such a way that the elements have begun to dissolve in such a way that there is actually very little focus and very little life force within the extremities, yet that person is extremely sensitive to the feeling and comfort of their surroundings. This is true, of animals as well. For animals, in the animal kingdom, the most difficult suffering that they experience due to their ignorance is fear. They are so profoundly ignorant and reactive that their minds are constantly filled with fear. Animals are constantly fearful, and therefore they are born into a predator and hunted scenario, which expresses that constant fearfulness. And animals are always in that situation. And an animal, the best thing that you can do for an animal at the time of death, besides practicing poa for them and actually stimulating that the opening at the top of the head, as I told you to do, is the same thing that you can do for a human, which is to literally pack them with pillows so that they are comfortable and in a position where they are yes, reclining perhaps, but also where they could pull themselves together and look around if they needed to. That would be the best thing for an animal. For a human being, if at all possible, they should try to die sitting up. And of course, some of us who are yogis will be able to put ourselves in the lotus posture and lock, because we have learned how to do that, lock and sit up. But most of us, and even those of us who have such training, depending on our physical condition, will need to have pillows packed all around us. Behind the small of the back so that the spine stays straight like that, right back in there. Around the shoulders so that one does not slip from side to side, and even around the neck so that the neck remains erect, but they should be comfortable like that. The reason why this should happen is, once again, you are susceptible. If you have the sensation of falling as you are dying, it will frighten you more if you are lying down. If you do not feel, if you do not have a sense of support around you, it may be a little frightening. But it should not be frightening for you, because you will have arranged for someone to create a nest for you, sort of like a womb in which to be born into another reality, in a sense. A very comforting kind of womb-like environment. Create that for you. You can ask for that, and you should set that up, and you should give explicit instructions. It is your right to have the conditions that you desire at the time of your death. So that is one thing. And then another thing is that often people die under the worst situations. They unfortunately will die with an accident, or with some sort of violence, or when some sort of horrible thing is happening to you. Some people may get murdered, some people may get, the worst death. Some people may get murdered, some people may be run over by a truck, other people may be, fall off a building. There's so many different horrible ways that one can die, that and those kinds of deaths, even though it may seem from our point of view that, well, the transition is instantaneously over, so that's it. But that only makes sense if you believe that what comes afterward is either blank space with nothing to deal with at all, or some sort of fantasy land that, suddenly you end up on a game board that looks a lot like Candyland, and you're just going, here I am, happy, whatever, deluded idea that we have. The true idea is that the time approaching our death should be well considered and well planned for. The time that is actually our transference should be well considered and well planned for, because the next period of time will be lived according to how we have considered and planned. You are not going to exit and just not be anywhere. you must continue, and wherever you go, your habitual tendency and your mind state will be with you. And that is the experience that you will have. So life doesn't end for you when you die. There's no escape from life. One must continue. And one will continue experiencing the results of one's habitual tendencies and karma. This happens even so much more at the time of death, the very time of death. So, we have to think about the very moment of death, and then we have to think about the experience of transferring the consciousness. What we're going to talk about now, continuing to talk about, is the actual making the moment of death as pleasant and as comfortable as possible. And this is for, of course, either a person who is a practitioner and has planned for their death, and that person is fortunate. They will be a lot more comfortable than anyone who has not planned for their death, and except for those people that are dying in ignorance and you know, just don't have the good sense to open their eyes and really pay attention to what's happening around them. That is a level of delusion which will probably rebirth in something, the person who simply dies, is what I'm trying to say, with a kind of, oh, everything's going to be fine, this is all going to work out okay, just think positive thoughts. That kind of attitude. A person who dies like that, could very well be reborn as an animal because of the heavy delusion and state of ignorance that when they willingly close their eyes and do not plan and do not, take note of their environment and try to negotiate and do the best that they can, they may very well take rebirth as an animal because they are willing themselves to remain ignorant. At the time of death, we should make the person as comfortable as possible. They will react, they will respond to their environment, they will do it differently, they may not be able to tell us, so it is up to us who are guiding those who are dying to make them comfortable. It is the responsibility of the loved ones around them or the Sangha who is around them, and particularly if the person is dying, it would be ideal for them to have around them their Lhama and foreordained, because where foreordained are gathered, it is considered that the Sangha is there, and all the virtue and merit of the Sangha are contributed to the situation. You may have less, and you may only have your Lama, or you may have just one monk or one nun. But the best situation is to have one's Lama and foreordained, monks or nuns, either one, foreordained in robes, praying for you, 4 or more. So that is one excellent condition. If the person is a practitioner, they will feel confident, calmed, if they are made aware that their Lama is there. You should explain that to your family. Your family should understand that while you will take comfort from their presence, you will take much more comfort from the presence of your Lama. And you should explain to your family that you view death as a doorway, that you see death as being a transition or a phase that you must go through in order to continue on with the rest of your experience. And so, what you must do, literally, at the time of your death, is to let go of those things that bind you to life now. And so, if you are to die in such a way as will only please your relatives, letting them be there, letting them be in control, letting them pat you on the butt, or shake your hand, or kiss you on the cheek, or do anything that they want to do as they're saying goodbye to Uncle Sam or whoever you are. At that, you are making a grave mistake. And I'll tell you why you're making a grave mistake. It is that the best case scenario, the way to die, is to know that you are dying, to have fully absorbed, hopefully by that time, the teaching that you cannot take one, even as much as one sesame seed that you have accumulated in your material life with you. There is nothing of your material life, not a bit of it, that you can take over with you in your next experience, except the karma that you have accumulated during this time, or the habit patterns of your mind. Those things will survive, but everything else, including your relationships with your loved ones, that's it. It's gone. So the best case scenario is that around the time of your death and at the actual time of your death, you would say to the 3 precious jewels, I offer everything to you. I offer everything, which in a way it sounds like, hey, you're dying anyway. That's awful generous of you. Thanks a lot. Right before you die, you give a last dollar in your purse to a poor person. But in fact, you would be surprised at how many people don't think that way. I had the painful experience of having, in fact, it was a relative of a Sangha member here, a man who was dying of AIDS, and it was really coming to his time, and he was experiencing some of the closing episodes, including the confusion and dementia that is associated with AIDS sometimes. And but before that happened, he had the opportunity to come and talk with me, and I could see that this man had a heavy level of delusion, and that it was really difficult, and that literally in order for me to reach him, it would be a shot in the dark. A shot in the dark. He was so filled with a bunch of, please pardon my French, but bullshit, new age ideas, that it was impossible to reach him. I mean, he literally sat there and said, I don't care about death, that's going to happen anyway, there's nothing I can do about it, so I think I'll concentrate on cementing my relationships with the people that I'm living with now. Basically what he was saying is that he wants to continue gratifying himself, but he wants to do it in a sick way, because he's a sick person. So while he called it one thing in his healthy life, he called it another thing in his sick life. In his healthy life, he was getting what he wanted. In his sick life, he was still getting what he wanted, but he said that he was cementing the relationships with the people that he was living with. And so you see, that is a kind of delusion that is inappropriate at the time of death. At the time of death, ideally, one should say goodbye. One should say, I love you, but you are not coming with me. I must travel this alone. It is my skills upon which I will depend, my training. It is my guru that I need at this time. It is my ability to recollect or to call out that is crucial here. And so, we'll see you next time. And you will. You'll see him next time. Some other time, anyway. And so you take your time and you say goodbye, but once you have said goodbye, you must renounce cyclic existence at the time of your death. You must be able to let go. You should think of all you've accumulated during the course of your life and visualize it accumulated in front of you like a beautiful mandala of jewels, and then offer it to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And you should think also of all of the effort that you've put into happiness with other beings, the relationships, the love, the joy, the tears, the sorrow, all of the mixture, and seeing it just as one would see it if they could not distinguish between shit and chocolate. You would offer that also, transform it into jewels and offer that also to the three precious jewels, and just offer every single stitch of effort, every experience that you have ever had from beginningless time until this moment to the three precious jewels. And you say within yourself that you are ready.
Thank you so very much for being with us tonight, and we're always so happy to have you here. This is the second to last part of the series. The next one will be next Wednesday evening at 7:30, same time, same channels, and it will be the continuation of this teaching. So we hope you can join us for that. If you're unable to come at the times that we're actually streaming it, they will be available for you on YouTube and probably also on Facebook. So that hopefully will be a support for you. There's many things that we offer here at the temple, and we hope that you can come and take part in some of it or all of it. We offer meditation Saturday and Sunday mornings at 10, and that is on YouTube. It's taught by or facilitated by one of our nuns, and it offers some meditation sessions and some guidance on how to do it. So it's for beginning students, but also for anyone who wants to just meditate with some support. So that's on weekends. We offer practices every day. There's a soak, which is a food offering practice that gains you a tremendous amount of merit. And that's Monday through Friday at 5:30 p.m. on Zoom, and Saturdays at noon and Sundays at 2. Although this coming Sunday is Dakini Day, so there will be a Yumka Dakini soak, a longer one, also, but it will be at 2. So times will stay the same. The practice will be different, and you can find out what practice it is. You'll find a link to the practice and all the pieces that you need if you want to go to our calendar on events on tara.org, TARA.org. Every evening at 7 p.m. on Facebook Live, there's Medicine Buddha, and it's a short practice in English that Jetsunma gave, particularly for this time when so many people are sick or from various causes. Started out with COVID, but there's always been sickness, and there's so many kinds of it. So you're welcome to join in that. You can offer your own dedications at that time and join in doing something to bring about some healing for that situation. On the topic of bringing in prayers and dedications, you can email at any time prayers@tara.org and put in your dedications for people, and they will be read at the daily soak offerings during the week. So that's also available to you. And there's often, if you come to the temple, which we hope you do, because the outside is wonderful, even though inside is currently still not open. The outside is fabulous, and there's lots of places for prayers, meditation, just contemplation and peace, and so many different things, as well as some really wonderful animals that would just love your attention and care. One little pet goes a long way, and often brings you just as much joy. So plenty of things to do here, and we do have the book we put outside for you to offer prayers in writing, and those prayers also are read during the week. So many things for you to do should you want to actually make a stronger connection with Jetsunma and make an offering to her for the teaching that you received. You can do that on her PayPal account, which is jetsunmagift@gmail.com on PayPal. JETSUNMAGIFT@gmail.com on PayPal. Anyway, until next week, or until Sunday when we do another teaching by Jetsunma, we welcome you and hope you have a wonderful week, and stay safe, and we will see you even if virtually then. Take care.